At 4:07 p.m., she said, "I do" to a man who wasn't supposed to be hers, wearing a dress meant for someone else's future. The chapel overlooked Lake Tahoe like a glass box suspended between heaven and earth, but Simone felt like she was falling through both. By midnight, she realized the woman she replaced hadn't just fled a wedding. She'd escaped a carefully constructed prison. Have you ever done a favor for a friend that completely changed your life? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The numbers he whispers into the wall safe every night, they aren't bank codes. They're the names of his previous wives, and none of them are still breathing. What would you do if you discovered your marriage certificate was actually a death warrant? Have you ever done a favor for a friend that completely changed your life? Have you ever stepped into someone else's shoes only to find they were walking toward a cliff? Maybe you've covered for someone at work or lied to protect someone you cared about. But what happens when that lie becomes a trap you can't escape? Sometimes helping the people we love becomes the very thing that destroys us. We think we're being noble, sacrificial, generous. But what if the person asking for help isn't the victim they pretend to be? What if your kindness is exactly what someone dangerous has been counting on? But what happens when the trap becomes the key to your freedom? If you've ever wondered how far you go to save yourself from your own choices, this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust. Every decision Simone made with good intentions led her deeper into a nightmare she never saw coming. Follow along as we discover how a simple wedding favor became a fight for survival that would change everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and the price of both. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 36 hours before she became someone else's wife. She had 36 hours to become someone else, and a lifetime to regret how perfectly she succeeded. The call came at 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday. Simone was hunched over her laptop in her studio apartment in Decatur, Georgia, trying to make a logo design work for a client who kept changing his mind about everything. The rent was due in 4 days, and she had exactly $63 in her checking account. "Simone, thank God you answered." Maya's voice cracked through the phone like glass breaking. "I need you to do something for me. Something crazy." Simone pushed back from her desk, rubbing her eyes. They'd been best friends since their sophomore year at Howard, but Maya had been different lately. Distant, nervous, like she was always looking over her shoulder. "What kind of crazy?" Simone asked, though part of her already knew she'd say yes. "That's what you did for your best friend. You said yes first and asked questions later. I need you to be me at my wedding this Saturday." The words hung in the air like smoke. Simone waited for the punchline, but Maya's breathing on the other end sounded ragged, desperate. "Maya, what are you talking about? I can't marry him, Simone. I can't, but I can't call it off either. There are reasons, complicated reasons. I need someone to show up, say the words, get through the ceremony. Just until I can figure out what to do next." Simone stood up, pacing the small space between her bed and her desk. "You want me to marry your fiancé? Maya, that's not crazy, that's illegal. And impossible. And we look similar enough. Same height, same build. Your hair's different, but we can fix that. The dress will fit. I already checked." "How did you already check?" "Because I've been thinking about this for weeks." The silence stretched between them. Outside, Simone's neighbor was playing music too loud again, bass thumping through the thin walls. Her life felt small suddenly, predictable, safe in its limitations. "What aren't you telling me?" Simone asked. Maya's laugh sounded hollow. "Everything. I'm telling you everything except the part that would make you say no." "Then maybe I should say no. Please." The word came out broken. "Simone, I have never asked you for anything. Not really. Not like this. I'll pay you. $50,000. Simone sat down hard on her bed. $50,000 would change everything. Her student loans, the constant worry about rent, the freedom to actually choose clients instead of taking whatever work came her way. "Where are you right now?" Simone asked. "Airport. I'm about to board a flight to Portland. I'll stay there until this whole thing blows over." "And what exactly is going to blow over?" Another pause. "I made some mistakes, Simone. Got involved with the wrong people. Quinn isn't who I thought he was when I agreed to marry him. but it's too late to back out safely. What kind of wrong people? The kind that don't take no for an answer. Simone closed her eyes. Her mother always said her greatest weakness was her inability to abandon people who needed her, even when helping them hurt her, even when she knew better. Tell me about Quinn, your fiance, the man you wanted to marry. Tech guy, made a fortune in some kind of software development. Lives in Nevada now, has this big house outside Reno. Quiet, kind of awkward around people. He won't be expecting much conversation. And after the ceremony, you disappear. Tell him you need some air or you're not feeling well. Get out of there. The marriage won't be legal anyway. You'll be using my identity. It's just for show. Simone looked around her apartment. The laptop with the half-finished logo. The stack of overdue bills on her kitchen counter. The life that felt like it was shrinking a little more each day. $50,000? She asked. Cash. I'll transfer it tonight if you say yes. The wedding dress hung in Simone's cramped apartment like a ghost of someone else's dreams. Ivory silk catching the harsh light from her kitchenette. She'd driven to Maya's apartment at 3 a.m. to pick it up, along with a suitcase full of Maya's clothes, her ID, and detailed notes about her life story. The dress fit perfectly, too perfectly. Standing in front of her bathroom mirror, Simone looked like a different person. Maya had always been the pretty one, the polished one, the one who belonged in rooms that Simone only cleaned. But wearing Maya's life felt like putting on armor. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Flight lands in Reno at 2:15 p.m. Friday. Car will pick you up. Remember, you're nervous about the wedding. You've been having second thoughts. That explains any strange behavior. Simone stared at the message. Maya hadn't mentioned anything about Quinn expecting her to have second thoughts. What else hadn't she mentioned? As the plane descended toward Reno, Simone clutched Maya's ID and rehearsed her backstory one final time. Connecticut childhood, private school, parents who died in a car accident when she was 22. She had no idea that someone in first class was watching her practice being someone else and taking notes. Have you ever agreed to help a friend without knowing the full story? When has your loyalty put you in danger? Share your experience below, because what happened next would test everything Simone thought she knew about trust. She expected a tech nerd with social anxiety. Instead, she found a man whose eyes seemed to read code written on her soul. The rehearsal dinner was held at a restaurant carved into the side of a mountain, all glass and steel jutting out over Lake Tahoe like a modern altar to money. Simone, Maya now, she had to remember, stood in the marble bathroom, checking her reflection one more time. The blue dress Maya had chosen fit perfectly, but it felt like wearing someone else's skin. When she walked into the private dining room, conversation stopped. Not because she was beautiful, though the dress and professional hair styling had transformed her, but because something in the air shifted, like a predator had caught a scent. Maya. She turned, and her breath caught. Quinn Bancroft stood at the head of the table, and he was nothing like Maya had described. Not awkward, not quiet. He moved through the room with the controlled grace of someone who owned everything in it, including the people. He was tall, broader than she'd expected, with dark hair that looked expensive to maintain and eyes that seemed to catalog every micro-expression on her face. When he smiled, it was perfect. Too perfect. "You look beautiful," he said, taking her hand. His touch was warm, confident, more beautiful than I remembered. "Thank you." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You look different too." Something flickered in his expression. Different how? She scrambled for an answer. Maya had told her Quinn was shy, that he barely looked at people when he talked to them. But this man's attention felt like being studied under a microscope. "More confident," she managed. "The mountains agree with you." His smile widened, and he placed his hand on her lower back, guiding her to the head table. His touch was possessive in a way that made her skin warm despite herself. "Ladies and gentlemen," Quinn announced to the room, his voice carrying easily over the conversation. "As most of you know, Maya has been hesitant about this whole affair. Wedding nerves, she calls them." Simone felt heat rise in her cheeks. She hadn't expected to be put on display like this. But seeing her tonight, Quinn continued, his eyes never leaving her face. "I think those nerves have finally settled." "Haven't they, darling?" The room waited for her answer. Simone felt trapped between lies. Maya's lies about who she was, Quinn's lies about what Maya had been feeling. "I'm still nervous," she said honestly. "But I'm here." "You're here," he repeated, like he was tasting the words. "More present than you've been in months. I was starting to think you were performing being here instead of actually being here." The comment landed strange, too specific, like he'd been watching Maya's behavior closely enough to notice patterns. Like he'd been taking notes. Dinner passed in a blur of conversations Simone couldn't quite follow. Quinn's business associates spoke in code about projects and timelines. His family, what little was there, asked polite questions about her childhood that she answered with Maya's rehearsed stories. But Quinn never stopped watching her. Even when he was talking to someone else, she could feel his attention like heat from a fire. Every time she laughed, every time she reached for her water glass, every time she shifted in her chair, he cataloged it all. After the main course, he leaned close enough that his breath warmed her ear. "You seem different than your photos," he murmured. "More alive, like you're actually experiencing things instead of just going through the motions." Her heart stuttered. People change. They do. His hand found hers under the table, fingers intertwining with practiced intimacy. Though usually not this much, this quickly. Before she could respond, he stood, pulling her with him toward the restaurant's outdoor terrace. Lake Tahoe stretched out below them, dark water reflecting city lights like scattered diamonds. "Cold?" he asked when she shivered. "A little." He moved behind her, hands settling on her shoulders. From anyone else, it might have been comforting. From Quinn, it felt like being marked. "Tomorrow," he said, voice low, "everything changes. Are you ready for that?" She wanted to say no, wanted to tell him she was terrified, confused, completely out of her depth. Instead, she nodded. "Good." His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. "Because I have plans for us, Maya. Big plans." The way he said her fake name made her skin crawl and heat up at the same time. There was something wrong here. Something Maya hadn't told her. That night, alone in her hotel room, she found a note slipped under her door. Heavy paper, expensive, the kind of stationery that whispered money. "The woman you're pretending to be tried to warn me about you. Sleep well, Simone." Her blood turned to ice water. He knew. He'd always known. Have you ever felt like someone could see through your pretenses? Well, has intense attention felt both thrilling and terrifying? Drop a comment below, because tomorrow, everything Simone thought she understood about this arrangement was about to change. She walked down the aisle toward a man who called her by her real name in a room full of people who believed she was someone else. The morning of the wedding, Simone woke up to silence. Not the comfortable quiet of her apartment back home, but the heavy, expectant silence of a luxury hotel where even the air conditioning whispered money. The note from last night sat on her nightstand like a threat. Quinn knew who she was. He'd known all along, but he was still going through with the ceremony. Why? Her phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "How's everything going? Getting nervous?" Simone stared at the message. Maya was in Portland, probably sipping coffee at some hipster cafe, while Simone was about to marry a man who collected information about people the way other people collected stamps. A man who knew she wasn't who she claimed to be and seemed pleased about it. She typed back, "He knows I'm not you." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. "What do you mean? You left me a note. Call me by my real name. Maya, what did you get me into?" Her phone rang immediately. "Simone, listen to me." Maya's voice was tight with panic. "You have to get out of there. Right now. Don't pack, don't explain, just leave. The wedding is in 3 hours. There are 60 people coming. I can't just." "Yes, you can. I'm transferring the money to your account now. Take it and run." Simone looked out her hotel window at Lake Tahoe, crystal blue and deceptively calm. "What aren't you telling me about Quinn? Things I should have told you from the beginning. He's not just some tech guy, Simone. He's dangerous. I was stupid to think this would work." "Dangerous how?" But the line went dead. When Simone tried calling back, Maya's phone went straight to voicemail. 2 hours later, Simone stood in the bridal suite, staring at herself in Maya's wedding dress. She should leave. Every instinct told her to walk out of this hotel and catch the first flight back to Atlanta. But $50,000 was more money than she'd ever had, more than enough to change her life. And Quinn already knew the truth, which meant the most dangerous part. The deception was already over. Maybe she could get through the ceremony, collect the money, and disappear before anyone got hurt. The chapel was a marvel of glass and steel, suspended over Lake Tahoe like a transparent bridge between earth and sky. 60 guests sat in white chairs, their faces turned expectantly toward the altar where Quinn waited in a black tuxedo that probably cost more than Simone's rent. He looked perfect, too perfect, like someone had designed him specifically to be irresistible. The music started, some classical piece she didn't recognize, but that sounded expensive. Simone began her walk down the aisle, feeling like an actress in someone else's movie. Quinn's eyes never left her face, not once. Even when she stumbled slightly on the train of the dress, even when her bouquet started shaking in her hands, he watched her with the focused intensity of a scientist observing an experiment. When she reached the altar, he took her hands in his. They were warm, steady, hands that had never doubted themselves. "You're beautiful," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "Thank you. And you're brave. Braver than you know." The comment sent chills down her spine, but before she could respond, the officiant began speaking. Words about love and commitment and joining two lives together. Words that felt like lies in her mouth when it came time to repeat them. "Do you, Maya Elizabeth Chun, take Quinn Michael Bancroft to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She hesitated, 1 second too long, long enough for doubt to creep into the space between question and answer. "I do." Quinn's smile was radiant. "Do you, Quinn Michael Bancroft, take Maya Elizabeth Chun to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was strong, certain, like he'd been waiting his whole life to say those words. "You are exactly who I was meant to find." The last part wasn't in the script. It was improvised just for her, just for Simone, not Maya. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her like he meant it. Like this wasn't a performance or a business arrangement, but something real, something that mattered. His mouth was soft, warm, confident. His hands framed her face like she was precious. For a moment, just a moment, she forgot this was all pretend. Rice fell around them like snow as they walked back up the aisle together, Quinn's arm around her waist, his smile brilliant for the cameras. But when he leaned close to her ear, his voice was different. Quieter, more serious. "The car is waiting, Mrs. Bancroft. Time to go home." The way he said home made her blood freeze, because she heard forever. What would you do if you realized you were the pawn in someone else's game? Have you ever felt attraction to someone you knew was dangerous? Comment below, because the honeymoon was about to begin, and Simone had no idea what she'd just signed up for. The mansion had 47 rooms, 12 bathrooms, and 0 ways out that didn't require his permission. The drive from Lake Tahoe to Quinn's estate took 2 hours through increasingly empty Nevada desert. Simone, Mrs. Bancroft now, legally or not, sat in the passenger seat of a Tesla that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years, watching civilization disappear in the rearview mirror. Quinn drove with one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on her thigh in a gesture that should have felt natural between newlyweds, but instead felt like ownership. Every few minutes, he'd glance over at her, studying her profile like he was memorizing it. "Nervous?" he asked as they turned off the main highway onto a private road, marked only with a number. "Should I be?" His smile was perfect again. Too perfect. "That depends. How do you feel about solitude?" The estate rose from the desert like a technological oasis, all steel and glass, reflecting the setting sun. It was beautiful in the way that expensive things were beautiful, flawless, cold, untouchable. The kind of place that made you feel small just by existing. "Welcome home," Quinn said, and Simone tried not to notice how the main gate closed behind them with a soft electronic click. The staff, 3 people who introduced themselves without making eye contact, took their bags and disappeared like ghosts. Quinn led her through rooms that looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd read about human comfort, but never actually experienced it. Everything was white or black or chrome. clean lines, expensive furniture, not a single personal photograph or piece of art that suggested an actual human lived here. I had the bedroom redecorated, Quinn said as they climbed a staircase that curved like a spine. I thought Maya might find the previous design too clinical. What was it like before? Like a laboratory. He said it casually, like it was a normal thing to say about a bedroom. Like everyone redecorated their master suite to be less like a place where experiments happened. The bedroom was beautiful, she had to admit. Still modern, still expensive. Rich blues and soft grays. A king-size bed that looked like it could swallow her whole. Floor-to-ceiling windows that showed nothing but desert stretching to the horizon. The bathroom's through there, Quinn said, nodding toward a door she hadn't noticed. I had them stock it with everything Maya mentioned liking, though I suppose some preferences might have changed. He said it like he knew her preferences better than Maya's, like he'd been studying her specifically. I should call my mother, Simone said. Let her know I arrived safely. Something shifted in Quinn's expression. Your mother died in a car accident when you were 22. Maya's mother, I should say, right? Maya's backstory, not her own. But the correction felt like a warning. Of course. Sorry. Wedding nerves, I guess. She fumbled for an excuse. I meant my aunt, the one who raised me after your parents died. Quinn stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and understated. Maya, are you feeling all right? You seem confused. I'm Fina, just tired. Of course you are. His hand touched her cheek, gentle but somehow threatening. It's been a long day. Why don't you get some rest? I have some work to catch up on anyway. He kissed her forehead, a gesture that should have been sweet but felt like being marked, and headed for the door. Quinn. He paused, hand on the doorknob. Where exactly are we? I mean, what's the nearest town? About 60 miles south. But don't worry about that. Everything you need is right here. After he left, Simone explored the bedroom more carefully. The windows were beautiful, but they didn't open. The door to the hallway required a fingerprint scanner to unlock. Her phone, when she checked it, had no signal. She tried the bathroom door. It opened easily enough, revealing a space that looked like it belonged in a luxury spa. But the mirror above the sink was angled wrong, like it was meant to be viewed from another position, like maybe someone else was meant to be watching. That first night, as Quinn disappeared into his study, she tested every door, every window, every possible escape route. Some required fingerprints she didn't have. Others were simply locked, with no visible way to open them. The few that did open led to rooms that connected to other locked doors, creating a maze with no exit. She wasn't a guest in this house. She wasn't even really a wife, despite the ceremony and the ring that felt heavy on her finger. She lay in a stranger's bed wearing a stranger's name, listening to her husband whisper secrets to a wall safe at 2 a.m. The bedroom was a study in expensive minimalism. White walls, black furniture, and technology humming quietly in places she couldn't identify. Simone lay perfectly still in the enormous bed, wearing a silk nightgown that had been waiting in the dresser with the tags still on, trying to look asleep while her mind raced. Quinn had been gone for 3 hours. Business calls, he'd said with an apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. You know how it is? Except she didn't know how it was because Maya had never mentioned Quinn working at night. Maya had never mentioned a lot of things, apparently. At 1:47 a.m., she heard the door open. Soft footsteps across carpet that probably cost more per square foot than her entire apartment. The sound of clothes being removed, placed carefully on what she assumed was a chair. Then nothing for 10 minutes. Long enough that she started to wonder if he'd left again. At 2:03, she heard it. A soft mechanical whirring, like an electric lock disengaging. Then Quinn's voice, barely above a whisper, reciting what sounded like a list. Rebecca Martinez, age 26, psychological break day 14, terminated day 18. Simone's blood turned to ice water, but she forced herself to keep breathing steadily. To look asleep. Sada Kimu, age 28, psychological break day 9, terminated day 12. The words floated through the darkness like smoke. Clinical, cold, like he was reading from medical chart. Jennifer Walsh, age 31, Psychological break day, 22. Extended observation. Terminated day, 27. Terminated. The word echoed in her head like a gunshot. What did that mean in Quinn's world? Caroline Brooks, age 24. Psychological break day 6. Unexpected resistance. Terminated day 8. The whirring sound again. The safe closing. Maya Chun, age 27. Fled day -2. Status unknown. A pause that stretched like forever. Simone Hayes, age 26. Day 1. Baseline established. Proceeding to phase 2. Her name, her real name, spoken into the darkness like a prayer or a threat. When she crept closer to listen, moving carefully across the plush carpet, his voice stopped mid-whisper. The silence stretched taut between them, loaded with danger. "I know you're awake, Simone." She froze, caught between the bed and the wall where his voice had been coming from. In the dim light from the windows, she could see Quinn sitting in a chair she hadn't noticed before, watching her with the patient attention of a scientist observing a lab rat. "We need to talk about why Maya really ran." Her mouth felt dry as sand. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you do." He stood up, moving toward her with the controlled grace she was beginning to recognize as his natural state. "Maya was my 4th attempt. She showed promise initially, strong psychological profile, appropriate stress responses, excellent capacity for emotional bonding." He was talking about Maya like she was a research subject, like they all were. But she developed an unfortunate habit of asking questions about my work, about my previous relationships, about why certain rooms in this house stay locked. Simone backed toward the bed, but there was nowhere to go. Quinn matched her movement, closing the distance between them without seeming to hurry. She found some things she shouldn't have found. Photos, medical records, video footage from previous subjects. Subjects? Wives, if you prefer the romantic terminology. Though the marriage certificates were always just paperwork. Legal cover for what really mattered. He reached out and touched her face, fingers tracing her cheekbone with disturbing tenderness. "You're wondering what happened to them. Rebecca, Sarah, Jennifer, Caroline. You're wondering what terminated means in my personal vocabulary." She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "It means they served their purpose. Advanced our understanding of human psychological adaptation under controlled stress conditions. And when they'd given us all the data they could provide." He shrugged. "Well, ethical disposal became necessary." The room tilted around her. This wasn't a marriage. It wasn't even a kidnapping. It was something worse, a research project with her as the unwilling subject. Maya figured it out 3 days before the wedding. She tried to run, but you can't just cancel a wedding to Quinn Bancroft without consequences. So she found a substitute, someone who looked similar enough to pass initial observation, someone desperate enough to agree to anything for the right price. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. "Someone perfect for my research parameters. You've exceeded my expectations already, Simone. Your stress responses are fascinating. The way you've adapted to deception, the strength you've shown under pressure. It's exactly what I've been looking for. What do you want from me?" "Everything." His smile was beautiful and terrible. "I want to see how far you can be pushed before you break. I want to map every psychological defense mechanism you have, then strip them away one by one. I want to document what happens to the human mind when hope becomes impossible." He leaned closer, lips brushing her ear. "And when I've learned everything I can from you, when you've served your purpose completely, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. When as helping the people we love become the very thing that destroys us. How do you maintain your identity when someone is systematically trying to break down your psychological defenses?" Comment below with your thoughts on survival and mental resilience, because Simone's real test was just beginning. Her best friend hadn't just fled a wedding. She'd escaped the same fate that claimed 4 other women who'd worn Quinn's ring. The next morning, Quinn brought her breakfast in bed like they were honeymooning at a 5-star resort instead of playing predator and prey in a desert fortress. Fresh strawberries, perfectly brewed coffee, croissants that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget back home. "You look tired," he said, setting the tray across her lap. Bad dreams. Something like that. He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that his thigh pressed against hers through the expensive sheets. His fingers traced patterns on her wrist while he talked, measuring her pulse without seeming to. I thought you might want to understand why you're here. Really here, not the story Maya told you about wedding favors and nervous brides. Simone forced herself to take a bite of croissant. It tasted like cardboard, but she needed to keep her strength up. I'm listening. Maya was recruited 18 months ago. Not by me directly. I don't do my own recruiting anymore. Too messy. Too personal. I have people who identify potential subjects based on very specific psychological profiles. He pulled out a tablet, swiping through what looked like detailed psychological assessments. Photos of women who looked vaguely similar to each other, similar to her. Intelligence above average, but not genius level. Trauma history that creates resilience without destroying adaptability. Financial stress that makes risky decisions seem reasonable. Social isolation that minimizes missing person reports. Each description hit like a physical blow. He wasn't just describing Maya. He was describing her. Maya fit the profile perfectly. Childhood abandonment issues, parents who died when she needed them most, a best friend who served as her primary emotional support system. Quinn's fingers moved to her pulse point, pressing gently. What does that have to do with me? Everything. His smile was clinical, cold. Maya was never the real target, Simone. She was the delivery system. The room seemed to tilt. What? My research requires subjects who display specific stress responses under controlled conditions. Maya's psychological profile was promising, but yours was perfect. The problem was getting you here voluntarily. Quinn swiped to another screen showing surveillance photos of Simone going about her daily life in Atlanta. At the coffee shop near her apartment. At the grocery store. Walking to her car after late nights at the office. We've been watching you for 8 months. Your financial situation, your relationship patterns, your response to crisis situations. Maya's sudden engagement to a wealthy stranger, her mysterious problems requiring rescue, her desperate plea for help. All of it was designed to activate your specific psychological triggers. Simone's hand started shaking. The coffee cup rattled against its saucer. Maya was never in danger. She was being paid to deliver you. $50,000 to bring her best friend to my laboratory, plus another $100,000 once you were secured. That's not true, but even as she said it, pieces started falling into place. Maya's sudden distance in recent months, the way she'd known exactly which emotional buttons to push, the fact that she'd already checked to see if her wedding dress would fit Simone. She's in Portland right now, staying at the Kimpton Hotel under her real name, spending her delivery fee on spa treatments and expensive dinners. Would you like to see the credit card receipts? Quinn pulled up bank statements, hotel reservations, restaurant bills, all dated after Maya had supposedly fled in terror, all showing someone living comfortably on a 6-figure payday. The wedding wasn't real, Simone. The marriage certificate won't be filed. Maya will return from her crisis in a few weeks with a story about cold feet and emotional breakdown, and everyone will sympathize with her narrow escape from a controlling husband. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. But you'll still be here, because unlike Maya, you actually fit my research parameters. Your psychological resilience, your capacity for adaptation under stress, your ability to maintain hope in impossible situations. It's fascinating. His fingers traced her throat, feeling her rapid pulse. Do you know what Rebecca's breaking point was? Day 14. Sarah lasted only 9 days before complete psychological collapse. Jennifer held out for 22 days, but her resistance mechanisms were all wrong. Too rigid, too brittle. And Caroline? Caroline was special. She lasted 8 days, but her break was explosive, violent, exactly the kind of data I needed for the next phase of research. Quinn stood up, moving to the window that offered nothing but empty desert in every direction. They all believed they were in love with me by the end. Trauma bonding is remarkably effective when properly managed. The human mind will attach to anything that offers even the illusion of safety. Simone found her voice. What happens when your research is finished? That depends on what we learn. Some subjects provide more useful data than others. Some develop responses that exceed the original research parameters. He turned back to her, and his eyes had a light in them that made her skin crawl. I'm hoping you'll be one of the special ones. His touch became possessive as he sat back down, fingers measuring her fear response while his thumbs stroked her throat with disturbing tenderness. I can already tell you're different from the others. Stronger, more complex. Maya chose well when she decided to sacrifice you. She didn't sacrifice me. She asked for help. She sold you. Quinn's voice was gentle, like he was breaking bad news to a child. For $150,000 and her own freedom, she knew exactly what kind of research I conduct. She'd seen the files on previous subjects. She knew you wouldn't be coming home. The breakfast tray slid off her lap as her body went numb. Maya had known. Her best friend, the person she trusted more than anyone, had delivered her to a monster for money. The question now, Quinn said, standing up to collect the fallen dishes with the careful movements of someone accustomed to cleaning up messes, is whether you're going to fight this process or embrace it. Fighting makes the psychological breakdown more violent, but less useful for research purposes. Cooperation leads to more interesting data, but also, he paused, considering, more intimate discoveries. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? How do you process the discovery that your pain serves someone else's agenda? Share your experience below, because Simone was about to learn that survival sometimes requires becoming someone you never thought you could be. He offered her a choice: play his psychological games and live, or refuse and join the collection of women who'd underestimated his commitment to research. Quinn led her through the house like a tour guide, showing off his favorite museum. Except the exhibits were designed to break human minds, and she was the newest addition to the collection. This was Rebecca's room, he said, opening a door on the second floor. The space looked like a luxury hotel suite, complete with fresh flowers and Egyptian cotton sheets. She lasted 14 days. Quite impressive, actually. Simone stepped inside, fighting the urge to run. The room felt like a tomb dressed up as a bedroom, beautiful and dead. What happened on day 14? She stopped eating, stopped speaking, just lay in bed staring at the ceiling until her heart gave out from stress. Quinn ran his hand along the dresser, straightening objects that were already perfect. Psychological shutdown, the mind protecting itself by simply switching off. He showed her Sarah's room next, then Jennifer's, then Caroline's, each one decorated differently. Each one holding the ghost of a woman who died for Quinn's research. And now this is yours. The last room was different from the others. Brighter, more modern, like he'd learned something from previous failures and adjusted his approach. I'm not staying in a dead woman's bedroom. No, you're not. Quinn's smile was pleased, like she'd passed some kind of test. This room was designed specifically for you, Simone. Based on 18 months of studying your preferences, your psychological triggers, your responses to environmental stressors. The walls were painted in soft blues and grays, colors that had always calmed her. The furniture was simple but elegant, nothing like the stark minimalism of the master bedroom. There were books on the shelves, novels she'd mentioned liking in social media posts years ago. How did you know I like these books? We know everything about you. Quinn moved to a desk that held art supplies, high-end markers and paper, tools she could never afford but had always wanted. Your abandoned art major, your secret dream of illustrating children's books, your habit of doodling when you're nervous. He'd been inside her head for months, learning her weaknesses, mapping her desires. The room wasn't just a prison, it was a psychological trap designed specifically for her. The choice is simple, Quinn continued, settling into a chair position to observe the entire space. You can accept your situation and work with me to generate useful research data, or you can resist and follow the same path as my previous subjects. What kind of research? Psychological adaptation under controlled stress. How far can the human mind bend before it breaks? What combinations of hope and despair produce the most interesting responses? How does trauma bonding develop when the subject knows they're being manipulated? Quinn pulled out a tablet and stylus, already taking notes. For instance, right now you're calculating escape routes while simultaneously recognizing their futility. You're angry at Maya, but also hoping this is some elaborate misunderstanding. You're afraid of me, but also somewhat attracted to my attention. Every observation was accurate, which made it worse. He was reading her like an open book. Your heart rate is elevated but not panicked. Your breathing is shallow but controlled. You're in survival mode, but you haven't given up hope yet. He made notes as he spoke. Excellent baseline data. And if I refuse to be your lab rat, then you join the others. His voice remained conversational, like they were discussing dinner plans. Though, I should mention that Caroline tried the resistance approach. She was quite determined, actually. Lasted 8 days before her psychological defenses collapsed completely. Quinn pulled up video footage on his tablet. Security camera clips of a woman who looked disturbingly similar to Simone. Same height, same build, same stubborn set to her jaw. Day 1, she threw furniture at the cameras. Day 3, she tried to pick the locks with hairpins. Day 5, she attempted to break the windows with a lamp base.
The footage showed Caroline becoming increasingly frantic, increasingly desperate. By day 7, she was talking to herself, creating imaginary conversations with people who weren't there. Day 8, complete psychotic break. She attacked me with a broken mirror shard, convinced I was some kind of demon sent to torture her soul. Quinn's finger traced a thin scar along his jawline. After that, well, the research data became much less useful. Simone stared at the art supplies, the books, the room designed to feel like safety while serving as a cage. What happens if I cooperate? You help me understand how extraordinary minds adapt to extraordinary circumstances. You participate in controlled psychological experiments. You provide honest feedback about your emotional and mental state during various stress scenarios. And then, that depends entirely on what we discover together. Quinn stood up, moving closer with the predatory grace that seemed natural to him. Some research projects conclude when the data collection is complete. Others evolve into something more intimate. His fingers brushed her cheek, and despite everything she knew about him, her body responded with unwanted heat. I'm hoping you'll prove more interesting than my previous subjects, more resilient, more compatible with long-term study. The word compatible sent chills down her spine, because it sounded like he was talking about more than research. It sounded like he was considering keeping her. I need to think about this. Of course you do. Quinn headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Simone, the art supplies are yours regardless of your decision. Consider them a welcome gift. After he left, she examined the room more carefully. The books were all first editions. The art supplies were professional grade. Even the prison bars were gilded with gold. But when she tested the windows, they were just as locked as everywhere else in the house. Beautiful didn't mean free. Comfortable didn't mean safe. How far would you go to stay alive? When does survival become collaboration with evil? Comment below with your thoughts, because tomorrow, Simone would have to choose between resistance and cooperation, and both paths led to places she'd never imagined. The groundskeeper who trimmed roses by day was the same man who'd helped Maya escape through tunnels that predated Quinn's security system. Simone spent her first week in a room designed specifically for her psychological profile, trying to find cracks in Quinn's perfect system. The windows didn't open. The door locked from the outside. The air vents were too small for human passage. Even the bathroom mirror was positioned to give whoever was watching the best view of her private moments. But Quinn had made one mistake. He'd given her art supplies. On day 6, she was sketching by the window, drawing the desert landscape because it was the only thing she could see. When movement caught her eye, a man in work clothes was tending to rose bushes near the edge of the property, close enough to the house that she could see his face. He was older, maybe 50, with sun-weathered skin and careful movements that suggested someone who'd spent years being invisible to important people. When he looked up toward her window, their eyes met for just a second. He touched his hat, a simple gesture that could mean anything or nothing. The next morning, he was back. Same roses, same careful attention to plants that already looked perfect. But this time, when he moved to a different section of garden, he left something behind. A small mirror, positioned to catch sunlight and reflect it toward her window. 3 short flashes. 3 long flashes. 3 short flashes. SOS. Simone's heart started racing. Someone else knew what was happening here. Someone was trying to communicate. That afternoon, Quinn appeared with his tablet and measuring devices, ready for another research session. These had become routine, controlled psychological tests designed to map her responses to various stressors. "You seem agitated today," he observed, checking sensors attached to her wrists. Heart rate elevated. Stress hormones higher than baseline. "Have you been having disturbing thoughts?" "Just tired." Lying. Quinn made notes on his tablet. "Interesting. Your deception patterns are quite sophisticated. Much better than Sarah's, though not as creative as Caroline's." He was comparing her to dead women like they were lab results. Like their deaths were just data points in his research. "I want to try something different today," Quinn continued, pulling out what looked like a medical device. "Sensory deprivation combined with audio stimuli. We'll monitor how your brain responds to isolation versus controlled input." "What kind of audio?" "Recordings from my previous subjects. Their final interviews before psychological breakdown. I'm curious whether hearing their experiences will accelerate your own adaptation process or trigger resistance behaviors." The idea of listening to Rebecca, Sarah, Jennifer, and Caroline's final words made her stomach turn. But refusing would mean moving toward Caroline's path, the path that ended in violence and death. "Fine," she said, "but I want something in return." Quinn raised an eyebrow. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate. I want to go outside. Just for an hour. I need fresh air and sunlight." "Absolutely not." "Then I'm not participating in your experiment today." They stared at each other across the room. Quinn's control versus her defiance. Finally, he smiled, an expression that never looked quite right on his face. 30 minutes. In the rose garden. With supervision. 20 minutes later, Simone walked through actual sunlight for the first time in a week. The heat on her skin felt like freedom, even with Quinn walking 2 steps behind her and security cameras tracking their movement. The groundskeeper was working near the far end of the garden, close enough to see but not to hear. When Quinn stopped to take a call, something urgent about data processing delays, Simone wandered toward the roses. "Careful of the thorns, miss." The groundskeeper's voice was quiet, gravelly. "These particular flowers have a tendency to draw blood. They're beautiful, though. Beauty can be dangerous." He pruned a dead bloom, his movements efficient and practiced. Previous lady of the house learned that the hard way. Previous lady. Maya. What happened to her? Simone kept her voice casual, like she was making small talk. Smart girl. Knew when to run. His eyes flicked toward Quinn, still occupied with his phone call. Left a message in the tool shed before she escaped through the old mining tunnels. Figured someone might come looking for answers eventually. Mining tunnels? This property used to be a silver mine. Tunnels run for miles underground, connect to the highway about 6 miles north. Most of them are sealed now, but a few passages still work if you know where to look. Quinn was wrapping up his phone call. Time was running out. "Where's the tool shed?" "Back corner of the property, behind the generator building." The groundskeeper moved to another rose bush, creating distance between them. Of course, shed's locked most of the time. Would take someone pretty desperate to break in. Quinn approached, sliding his phone back into his pocket. "Enjoying the tour, darling? The roses are lovely. Marcus has been maintaining these gardens for almost 20 years. Haven't you, Marcus?" "Yes, sir. Seen a lot of changes over the years." There was something in the way Marcus said it, a weight that suggested he'd seen more than just landscaping changes. He'd seen women arrive. He'd seen them disappear. "Time to go back inside," Quinn said, his hand settling possessively on Simone's lower back. "We have work to do." As they walked toward the house, Quinn's touch became more invasive, fingers tracing her spine like he was mapping her reactions to his presence. "Did you enjoy your little conversation with Marcus?" "We talked about roses." "I'm sure you did." Quinn's voice carried a warning she couldn't ignore. "Though I should mention that Marcus is quite loyal to me. He's worked here through 4 previous research subjects. He knows what happens to women who ask too many questions." That night, As Quinn whispered names into his wall safe and recorded data about her adaptation progress, Simone lay in bed planning. The tool shed, the mining tunnels, Maya's message. Maybe Quinn's perfect system had more cracks than he realized. Have you ever had to pretend attraction to someone dangerous? When has survival required you to become someone you didn't recognize? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because Simone was about to discover that escaping paradise could be deadlier than staying trapped in hell. She volunteered for his tests, not as submission, but as reconnaissance. The only way to understand his methods was to experience them firsthand. Today we're going to try something different, Quinn announced, wheeling a cart of medical equipment into her room. Neurological mapping combined with controlled emotional stimuli. Simone looked up from the sketch she'd been working on, a detailed drawing of the rose garden that was actually a map of potential escape routes. What does that mean? I'm going to monitor your brain activity while exposing you to carefully calibrated psychological stressors. Fear, hope, despair, attraction, all measured in real time to understand how your mind processes trauma. Quinn began setting up electrodes and sensors with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Too many times. And if I refuse, you won't. His smile was confident, predatory. Because you're curious. You want to understand what happened to the women who came before you. This is your chance to see the process from the inside. He was right, and they both knew it. Simone had spent the last 3 days thinking about Marcus's words, about Maya's message hidden in the tool shed, about the mining tunnels that might lead to freedom. But she needed more information about Quinn's operation before she could plan an escape. What kind of psychological stressors? We'll start simple. Isolation, sudden loud noises, flashing lights. Then we'll move to more complex scenarios. Recordings of previous subjects, simulated rescue attempts, false hope followed by crushing disappointment. Quinn attached sensors to her temples, his fingers lingering on her skin longer than necessary. The goal is to map exactly how your brain responds to different types of stress. Every person has unique patterns, but there are commonalities that emerge across subjects. Commonalities? For instance, all of my subjects initially responded to isolation with increased creativity. Sarah wrote poetry on the walls. Jennifer composed songs. Caroline created elaborate fantasy scenarios where she was the protagonist of romantic adventures. Quinn pulled up brain scans on his tablet, colorful images that looked like abstract art, but supposedly represented human consciousness under duress. But by day 10, the creativity always shifted to escape planning. Detailed drawings of the house layout, mathematical calculations about door locks, psychological profiles of staff members who might be sympathetic. He showed her drawings that looked disturbingly similar to her own sketches hidden beneath the mattress. Rebecca made it to day 14 before her brain activity showed complete resignation. Sarah reached that point on day 9. Caroline never quite got there. Her brain patterns remained active until the very end. What happened to Caroline's brain patterns after she broke? Quinn's eyes lit up with scientific enthusiasm. That's what made her so valuable for research. Most subjects show declining neural activity as psychological defenses collapse. But Caroline's brain went the opposite direction. Hyperactive, almost manic patterns right up until her heart stopped. He was talking about a woman's death, like it was a fascinating puzzle to solve. Are you ready to begin? Simone nodded, settling back in the chair Quinn had positioned in the center of the room. The sensors felt cold against her skin, alien devices measuring the most private parts of her existence. Her thoughts, her fears, her desperate hope that she might survive this. First test, auditory isolation combined with visual stimuli. Noise-canceling headphones blocked out all sound while screens around the room began displaying images. Photos of her life before Quinn, her apartment, her mother, her few friends. Then the images began changing. Her mother lying in a hospital bed, her apartment being cleared out by strangers. Missing person flyers with her face on them. On Quinn's monitoring equipment, she could see her brain activity spiking as the fake images triggered emotional responses she couldn't control. Excellent. Quinn murmured, though she couldn't hear him through the headphones. Fear response followed immediately by problem-solving activity. You're trying to determine which images are real and which are fabricated. The images shifted again. Now, they showed Maya living comfortably in Portland, shopping for expensive clothes, dining at five-star restaurants. All while Simone was trapped in a desert fortress, serving as a test subject for a madman's research. Her brain scans showed anger now, bright red patterns spreading across the neural map like fire. Betrayal triggers are working perfectly, Quinn noted. Rage response is much stronger than previous subjects. Sarah showed only sadness at this stage. Rebecca displayed resignation. But you show fury. The test continued for 2 hours. Images of false rescues that turned into nightmares. Audio of her own voice pleading for help, distorted and played back while she could do nothing but sit still and be measured. By the end, Simone felt wrung out, emotionally exhausted. But she'd also learned something crucial about Quinn's methods. He relied on psychological manipulation, but his techniques followed predictable patterns. He had a playbook, and once you understood the game, you could start planning countermoves. Fascinating results, Quinn said, removing the sensors. Your psychological resilience is remarkable, much higher than any previous subject at this stage. What does that mean? It means you're exactly what I've been looking for. Quinn's hand trailed down her arm as he coiled the sensor wires. The others broke too easily. Their data was useful, but limited. You might be able to survive the complete experimental protocol. And what happens then? Quinn's smile was beautiful and terrifying. Then we moved to phase 2, long-term psychological integration, seeing how far we can push your adaptability without causing permanent damage. He leaned closer, voice dropping to an intimate whisper. The goal is to create a subject who can maintain functionality while existing in a state of controlled trauma. Someone who can love their captor, trust their torturer, find hope in hopeless situations. A perfect victim, a perfect partner. Quinn's fingers traced her pulse point, measuring her fear response while his thumb stroked her throat. Someone who chooses to stay not because they have to, but because they want to. The idea was more terrifying than death, because part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, was already starting to crave his attention, his approval, his touch. How do you maintain your identity when someone is systematically trying to break down your psychological defenses? Share your thoughts on mental resilience below, because Simone was about to discover that the most dangerous prisons are the ones we build in our own minds. Maya hadn't betrayed her by accident. She'd sacrificed her best friend as the perfect subject for experiments. She was too afraid to endure herself. The evidence arrived in an unmarked manila envelope slipped under her door while Quinn was conducting his nightly ritual with the walls safe. Simone found it at 3 a.m. When she got up for water, her name written on the outside in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside were photocopies of documents that made her blood turn to ice. Contract agreements between Maya Chun and something called Bancroft Research Solutions. Payment schedules totaling $150,000 for subject delivery and behavioral consultation. Psychological profiles comparing Maya's stress responses to Simone's, with detailed notes about why Simone was the superior research candidate. But the worst document was a series of emails between Maya and Quinn, dated over the past 6 months. Simone's financial situation is getting desperate. Student loan payments are 3 months behind. Perfect timing to introduce the wedding scenario. She's been asking questions about my engagement. I think she suspects something's off. Should I back away from the friendship? Absolutely not. Maintain normal contact. Her suspicious nature actually makes her more valuable for the research. We need subjects who question their circumstances but can be emotionally manipulated into compliance. The dress fitting went perfectly. She looks exactly like me from behind, just like you predicted. Her psychological profile is holding steady. Strong survival instincts, loyalty to friends, tendency to sacrifice herself for others. Excellent. Schedule the wedding panic for exactly 48 hours before the ceremony. Any longer, and she might think too much about the decision. Any shorter, and she won't have time to emotionally commit to saving you. Simone's hands shook as she read message after message detailing her manipulation. Every conversation with Maya over the past 6 months had been calculated. Every plea for help had been scripted. Every moment of friendship had been a performance designed to deliver her to Quinn's laboratory. The final email was dated just 2 days ago. Subject secured successfully. Behavioral responses exceed projections. She's showing stronger resistance patterns than previous candidates, but also deeper emotional capacity. Recommend proceeding to advanced psychological integration protocols. Payment confirmed. Enjoy your vacation, Maya. You've earned it. Attached to the email chain were photos of Maya in Portland, exactly as Quinn had shown her. But these weren't surveillance photos. They were vacation selfies Maya had sent to Quinn. Pictures of expensive meals, luxury hotel rooms, spa treatments. All of it paid for with blood money earned by selling her best friend. Simone sat on the floor of her beautiful prison cell, surrounded by evidence of the most complete betrayal she could imagine. Maya hadn't just abandoned her. She'd studied her, profiled her, and delivered her to a monster who collected women like laboratory specimens. The door opened without warning. Quinn stood in the doorway, fully dressed despite the early hour, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "I see you found Marcus's gift," he said, nodding toward the scattered documents. "Marcus left these?" "Marcus has a guilty conscience about his role in my research. He helps with property maintenance, but he also disposes of evidence when subjects reach the end of their usefulness." Quinn stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He's been leaving anonymous packages for the last 2 subjects, hoping someone would escape and expose my work. Why doesn't he just leave himself? Because I pay him very well to maintain his silence. And because he knows what happens to people who try to betray me. Quinn's smile was cold. Marcus made the mistake of developing feelings for Caroline. Tried to help her escape through those mining. Marcus is very much alive. But Caroline, well, her escape attempt provided excellent data about psychological responses to false hope followed by crushing despair. Quinn sat on the bed, patting the space beside him like they were having a casual conversation instead of discussing murder. "The point is, Maya's betrayal shouldn't surprise you. I specifically chose someone capable of that level of calculated deception. Your friendship was always part of the experimental design. She was my best friend. She was a paid consultant who happened to know you intimately enough to push the right psychological buttons." Quinn's voice was gentle, like he was comforting a child. "Every story she told you about our relationship, every detail about my personality, every reason she gave for needing your help, all of it was carefully crafted to activate your rescue instincts." Simone thought about all the times Maya had seemed different lately. Distant, secretive. She'd assumed Maya was stressed about wedding planning. Instead, she'd been planning Simone's destruction. "The wedding dress fitting was particularly clever," Quinn continued. "Maya insisted you try it on because she knew seeing yourself in wedding white would activate subconscious desires for marriage, family, stability, all things your financial situation made impossible. You're saying she manipulated me into wanting what I couldn't have. I'm saying she presented you with a fantasy that felt achievable for exactly 48 hours. Long enough for you to commit emotionally, not long enough for rational thought to interfere." Quinn moved closer, his hand settling on her thigh with possessive familiarity. "Maya understood that your greatest weakness is your loyalty to people who don't deserve it. She used that against you more effectively than I ever could have managed alone." Despite everything she knew about him, despite the evidence of his crimes scattered around the room, Simone felt her body responding to his touch. Trauma bonding, he called it. The mind's desperate attempt to find safety in the presence of threat. What happens now? Now we move to the next phase of research. Quinn's fingers traced patterns on her skin that made her breath catch. You've seen the evidence of Maya's betrayal. You understand the depth of her deception. How does that knowledge change your psychological responses? His touch became more intimate, more invasive, and she found herself leaning into it instead of pulling away. Are you angry enough to let go of your moral constraints? Desperate enough to accept comfort from your captor? Broken enough to start building new emotional attachments? When he kissed her, it felt like surrender and rebellion at the same time, because she was choosing this, even knowing it was part of his psychological manipulation. Even knowing he was measuring her responses, cataloging her weaknesses, mapping the destruction of her independent identity. Can you fall in love with someone who hurt you? Is it possible to forgive someone who saved you from something worse? Share your thoughts on complex relationships below, because Simone was about to discover that the most dangerous moment in captivity isn't when you try to escape. It's when you stop wanting to. The hardest part about being trapped with someone who hurt you isn't the fear. It's when they start looking at you like you're their salvation instead of their experiment. Quinn stopped eating for 3 days after I found Maya's files. He'd sit in his study, staring at monitors that showed empty rooms, touching the wall safe like he was trying to remember why those names mattered. The man who'd mapped my psychological profile down to my childhood trauma responses couldn't figure out his own emotions. "You hate me," he said on Thursday morning, finding me in the kitchen making coffee. His voice sounded hollow, like he'd been practicing the words. "Yes, I didn't lie anymore. Lying was Maya's thing. But you haven't tried to escape since Tuesday." I poured 2 cups, handed him one. His fingers brushed mine when he took it. Still electric. Still wrong. "Where would I go, Quinn? You made sure of that." He flinched at his name. I'd stopped calling him anything else after the files. No more playing Maya. No more pretending this was normal. "I could let you go," he whispered. "Could you?" I sat across from him at the breakfast table, studying his face. Dark circles under green eyes that used to look cold, but now just looked lost. Because last time someone tried to leave, you had Marcus bury her in the rose garden. His cup shattered against the floor. "That's not." He stopped, hands shaking. Caroline tried to expose the program. She was in Get People Killed. Real people, not test subjects. The government was using my research to break prisoners, torture information out of them. She couldn't understand that my work was meant to heal trauma, not create it. The way he said it, like he believed it, made my stomach turn. This was how monsters justified themselves. Good intentions covering bloody hands. "So you killed her." I stopped her from getting others killed. His voice got stronger, more sure. This was practiced. This was how he slept at night. "Just like I'm protecting you now." "From what?" Quinn stood up, glass crunching under his feet. Blood seeped through his sock, but he didn't notice. "From them. The people who funded my research. Who want to use you the way they wanted to use Caroline." He pulled out his phone, showed me a text message from yesterday. Asterisk subject acquisition confirmed. Extraction team deploying. Maintain current protocols. Asterisk. My blood went cold. They're coming for me. They've been tracking you since Maya made contact 6 months ago. Every coffee shop you visited, every job interview, every date that went nowhere. They know your psychological profile better than you do because I gave it to them before I realized what they planned to do with it. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly. The walls pressed closer. What do they want? The same thing I wanted. To push you past your breaking point and see what emerges. But they won't stop when it gets dangerous. They won't care if you survive the process. Quinn knelt down, started picking up glass with bloody fingers. His movements were jerky, desperate. "I brought you here to protect you, not hurt you." The marriage, the isolation, it was cover. Legal protection. They can't touch a research subject who's also a legal spouse without massive paperwork. That's insane. Is it? He looked up at me, green eyes fierce. "You've been here 2 weeks. In that time, have I hurt you? Really hurt you, beyond the psychological games I needed to play to sell the cover story?" I thought about it. The surveillance, yes. The control, absolutely. But physical harm? The worst had been his clinical touch during the fake experiments, and even then he'd been careful. Gentle even. The experiments were theater, he continued, reading my expression. Designed to look legitimate on the cameras they'd been monitoring. Every test was harmless. Every measurement was fake data I fed into their system. My head was spinning. If you were protecting me, why not just tell me? Because you're not that good an actress. Quinn's smile was bitter. Your reactions had to be genuine or they'd know something was wrong. Fear keeps you alive sometimes, Simone. He said my real name like an apology. The security system chimed. Motion detected on the perimeter. Quinn's phone lit up with alerts from cameras showing black SUVs winding up the desert road toward us. "They're early," he whispered. I stood up fast, coffee forgotten. How early? They weren't supposed to come for another month. Something changed. Quinn was already moving, pulling weapons from hidden compartments I'd never noticed. Marcus must have sent word that you were fighting back. They want you before you get too strong to break. What do we do? The question surprised us both. We, like we were a team instead of prisoner and captor. Quinn stopped loading the gun, looked at me carefully. You have a choice, Simone. I could trigger the emergency protocols I built into this place. Destroy all the research, burn the files, make it look like a gas leak explosion. You walk away clean, new identity, money to start over anywhere you want. And you, I don't walk away from this one. The SUVs were getting closer. I could hear engines now getting louder. What's the other option? We fight, together. Use everything I know about their methods, everything you've learned about survival in the past 2 weeks. Odds aren't good, but if we win, we both get out. I looked at this man who'd kidnapped me, studied me, controlled me, and apparently spent the whole time trying to save my life in the most twisted way possible. His hands were steady now, purpose replacing panic. Whatever else Quinn was, he wasn't a coward. If we do this together, I said slowly, I need to know you won't sacrifice me to save yourself. I'd die before I let them take you. The way he said it, flat and certain, told me he'd already made that choice. Maybe he'd made it the moment he saw Maya's files. Maybe he'd made it the night he heard me crying through the surveillance system and realized I wasn't just data points on a screen. Then we fight. Quinn smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, it looked completely real. Have you ever had to trust someone who hurt you? Have you ever found yourself fighting beside someone you once feared? Sometimes survival makes allies out of enemies, and sometimes that's the only way anyone survives. The first explosion shook the house just as Quinn finished arming the last security system. Time to find out if we were strong enough to save each other. Nothing prepares you for the sound of automatic weapons tearing through your temporary home at 3 in the morning. Quinn grabbed my hand as the smart glass windows shifted into lockdown mode, turning the house into a fortress of steel and bulletproof barriers. His palm was sweaty, but his grip was steady. Whatever fears he had, he was keeping them locked down tight. Stay low, stay behind me, and don't try to be a hero, he said, handing me a pistol I'd never asked for. This isn't a movie. These people are professionals. Outside, men in tactical gear moved like shadows across the desert landscaping Marcus had maintained so carefully. They knew the property layout, knew which entrances were real and which were decoys. Quinn's former employers had done their homework. How long do we have? I whispered. Maybe 20 minutes before they breach the main house. The security system will slow them down, but it won't stop them. He led me through corridors I'd never seen before, past hidden panels that opened to reveal rooms full of servers, weapons, and supplies. The house had been built for this moment. Not to keep me in, but to keep them out. You've been planning this for months, I realized. Years. Quinn stopped at a wall safe, different from the one by our bedroom. This one needed his fingerprint, retina scan, and a verbal password. Ever since I figured out what they really wanted my research for. The safe opened to reveal hard drives, cash, and fake passports with our pictures. Mine showed a woman named Sarah Chun. It showed David Morrison. You made me an escape identity. I made us both escape identities. Quinn pocketed the cash, handed me the passport. The marriage license was real, Simone. Legal in all 50 states and 12 countries that don't extradite. If something happened to me, you'd inherit everything and disappear legally. The house shuddered as something big hit the front door. Shouting voices, coordinated and calm. They were coming in. Why? The question came out more desperate than I meant it. Why go through all this trouble for someone you barely know? Quinn stopped moving, looked at me with those green eyes that had watched me so carefully for 2 weeks. Because I've spent 5 years studying how to break people down, and you're the first person I met who just gets stronger under pressure. Because Maya sold you to me like you were disposable, and nobody deserves that. Because an explosion cut off his words as the front entrance blew inward. Time was up. We moved fast through the house, Quinn leading with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every detail. Down a staircase hidden behind the kitchen pantry, through a basement I didn't know existed, toward what looked like a steel door built into the foundation. Emergency tunnel, he explained, entering codes into a digital lock. Connects to the mine shaft system Marcus uses for maintenance. Should get us 3 miles away before they figure out we're gone. Should, not will. I noticed the difference. The tunnel was narrow, carved through rock and reinforced with modern supports. Solar lights clicked on as we moved, showing a path that stretched into darkness ahead. Quinn moved like he'd practiced this route. Emergency bag over his shoulder, gun ready, but not panicked. You really were protecting me, I said as we walked quickly through the artificial cave. I was trying to protect you. His voice echoed off stone walls. Protection and kidnapping looked pretty similar from the inside. Behind us, muffled sounds of the house being searched. Doors slamming, furniture breaking, voices getting frustrated as they found empty rooms and fake evidence. Quinn's theater had been thorough. What happens when they figure out we're gone? They'll track us. These people don't give up easily, and they have resources I can't match long-term. So we run forever? Quinn stopped walking, turned to face me in the strange blue light of the tunnel system. We were maybe 2 miles from the house now, surrounded by Nevada rock and artificial air circulation that hummed quietly around us. There's another option, he said carefully. Something I've been working on for 6 months, since I first realized what Maya was really doing. What kind of option? He pulled out his phone, showed me a contact list full of names I didn't recognize. Every government program has enemies. People who got burned, researchers who got shut down for asking questions, politicians who lost funding fights. I've been building a network. A network of what? People who want to expose this whole thing. Make it public. End the human experimentation programs permanently. The phone buzzed with an incoming call from someone named Jennifer Torres. Quinn answered. We're out of the house, he said without greeting. How much time do we have? A woman's voice came through clearly in the tunnel's acoustic space. 12 hours before they expand the search grid beyond your property. Maybe 18 if we can feed them some false leads. Jennifer's a reporter. Quinn explained to me. Washington Post. She's been investigating government research programs for 3 years. What does she need from us? I asked. Documentation. Proof of what they've been doing. Video evidence of the experiments. Quinn's expression went grim. I have everything. 5 years of research data, video files of what they did to test subjects before I went rogue, financial records showing how they funded the whole program. And releasing it means admitting what I did to you. To Caroline. To all the others. It means going from protected witness to wanted criminal. The tunnel suddenly felt colder. What are you saying? I'm saying we can end this tonight, but I'll probably spend the rest of my life in prison. And you'll be the star witness who puts me there. Quinn watched my face carefully, reading emotions the way he'd been trained to do. Looking for tells, for reactions, for the moment I'd choose myself over him. Or, he said quietly, we run. Take the money, use the fake identities, disappear completely. Let someone else fight this fight. Above us, somewhere in the desert darkness, helicopters were starting to circle. Search patterns expanding, technology narrowing down our location with every minute we stayed still. Have you ever held someone's future in your hands? Have you ever had to choose between justice and safety, between doing what's right and protecting the person you're starting to love? I looked at Quinn in the blue tunnel light and realized something that should have terrified me. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was afraid for him. How do we make the call? Living 300 feet below the Nevada desert changes your relationship with time, space, and the person you thought you were. The mining complex Jennifer Torres connected us to have been abandoned since the 1940s, but modern refugees had turned it into something between a bunker and an underground city. Solar power, hydroponics gardens, internet connections that bounced through servers in 12 different countries. People could disappear down here for years without leaving a trace. Government dissidents. Quinn explained as we walked through tunnels lined with living spaces carved into rock walls. Researchers who asked too many questions, military personnel who wouldn't follow illegal orders, civilians who stumbled onto programs they weren't supposed to know about. How many people live down here? Maybe 40 right now. Numbers change depending on who's running from what. Our assigned space was a natural cave expansion about the size of a studio apartment, furnished with military surplus and powered by a solar battery system. 2 sleeping bags, a camping stove, and a workstation where Quinn could access his hidden files remotely. Romantic, I said, dropping my emergency bag on the stone floor. Better than a cell in solitary confinement. Quinn was right, but it still felt like trading one prison for another. At least this one didn't have surveillance cameras tracking my every movement. How long do we stay here? As long as it takes Jennifer to build her story. Could be weeks, could be months. Quinn sat down on one of the sleeping bags, suddenly looking exhausted. Depends how much evidence she needs to make it stick. I sat across from him, close enough to touch, but careful not to. 2 weeks of forced intimacy had left us both confused about boundaries, about what was real attraction and what was survival strategy. Tell me about Caroline, I said. Quinn's hand stopped moving on the laptop keyboard. Why? Because if I'm going to testify about what you did to me, I need to understand what you did to her. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Around us, the underground complex hummed with distant conversations and the electrical sounds of people living and hiding. Caroline was different from you, he said finally. Brilliant but fragile. The psychological pressure broke her faster than I expected. How much faster? 3 days instead of the projected 3 weeks. The clinical way he said it made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to keep listening. This was who Quinn had been before. Maybe who he still was underneath the man who'd helped me escape. She started showing signs of dissociative episodes on day 2. By day 3, she was catatonic for hours at a time. I should have stopped the experiment, but my handlers were pressuring for results. Your handlers? The people who funded my research, who told me I was developing breakthrough treatments for PTSD and trauma recovery. Quinn's laugh was bitter. I actually believed I was helping people. That's when I realized what I'd become, Quinn continued. What the research was really for. They weren't trying to heal trauma. They were trying to weaponize it. I wanted to feel sorry for him. But Caroline's face kept flashing through my mind from the photographs I'd seen in his files. Young, hopeful, destroyed. Why didn't you stop then? I tried. Started feeding them false data, sabotaging experiments, protecting subjects instead of breaking them. But they were monitoring everything too closely. I needed cover to plan an escape. So you asked Maya to find you another subject. I asked Maya to find me someone strong enough to survive what I was planning. Someone who could handle the stress of the fake experiments while I figured out how to destroy the entire program. Quinn reached across the small space between us, touched my hand carefully. I needed someone who wouldn't break under pressure, someone who'd fight back. His fingers were warm, calloused from 2 weeks of manual labor as we'd prepared for this escape. Real hands, not the clinical touch of a researcher studying reactions. And if I had broken, like Caroline, then I would have ended the experiments immediately and found another way to protect you. Even if it meant blowing your cover. Especially then. I believed him, which scared me more than his lies ever had. It's easier to hate someone who's completely evil than someone who's trying to become good. Quinn, yeah. I need you to stop touching me for a while. My head's all confused about what's real and what's trauma bonding, and I can't think straight when you're this close. He pulled his hand back immediately. No argument, no hurt feelings. Just respect for a boundary I'd finally been strong enough to voice. I understand. Do you? Because I spent 2 weeks being studied like a lab rat, and now you're looking at me like I'm something precious you want to protect, and I can't tell which version of you is real. Quinn was quiet, processing. Around us, the underground city continued its quiet existence. People building lives in the spaces between legal and illegal, safe and dangerous. Both versions are real, he said finally. The man who studied you is real. The man who wants to protect you is real. The man who's falling in love with you is real. My breath caught. Don't. Don't what? Don't tell you the truth. Don't make this more complicated than it already is. It's already complicated, Simone. We're married. We're fugitives. We're living in a cave while federal agents hunt us down. Adding honesty about feelings doesn't make it more complicated. It just makes it real. Above us, footsteps echoed through the tunnel system. Someone approaching our cave. Expecting visitors? I asked. Quinn shook his head. Already reaching for the gun he kept within arm's reach. Nobody knows we're in this section except Jennifer. The footsteps stopped outside our cave entrance. A woman's voice called out, "Quinn? Simone? It's Jennifer. We need to talk." But when she stepped into our small space, the woman who'd been coordinating our escape for the past week looked different. Older, more official. And she wasn't alone. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said, not meeting our eyes. "They found the network yesterday. Everyone's been compromised." Behind her stood two men in suits who looked like they'd stepped out of a government handbook for anonymous federal agents. "Dr. Bancroft, Mrs. Bancroft." The taller one spoke with the kind of calm authority that comes from having all the power in the room. "You're both under arrest. Have you ever had the moment when you realize the people you trusted were never really on your side? When the safe space you built becomes just another trap?" I looked at Quinn as the handcuffs came out, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw real fear in his green eyes. Not fear of capture, fear of what they do to me once they had us separated. "Whatever happens next," he said quickly as they pulled him to his feet, "remember that you're stronger than anything they can do to you." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But as they led us back toward the surface, toward whatever government facility was waiting for us, I realized that all our planning, all our trust, all our underground refuge hadn't been enough. The hunters had found us, and this time, there was nowhere left to run. They separated us immediately, which was the first sign they understood exactly how dangerous we'd become together. The federal facility looked like every government building you've ever had nightmares about. Gray concrete, fluorescent lights, endless hallways that led nowhere and everywhere. My holding room had a table, 2 chairs, and a mirror that was obviously a window for people watching from the other side. I'd been sitting alone for 6 hours when the door opened and Maya walked in. She looked good. Professional black suit, hair perfectly styled, government identification badge hanging from a lanyard around her neck. Like she'd never been afraid of anything in her life, much less run from a wedding 2 weeks ago. "Hello, Simone." I'd imagined this moment during the long underground nights, planned what I'd say if I ever saw her again. Now, looking at my best friend's face, all I felt was empty. "Maya." She sat down across from me, folded her hands on the table like we were having coffee instead of a confrontation in a federal detention center. "I know you're angry." "Angry?" I laughed, and it sounded wrong in the sterile room. "I'm not angry, Maya. Angry would require me to still give a damn about you." Her professional composure cracked slightly. "I did what I had to do. You sold me. I saved you." The words came out fast, defensive. Maya had always been good at justifying her choices, but she'd never been good at hiding when she knew she was wrong. Save me from what? A boring life in Atlanta? Student loan debt? Having to figure out my own problems instead of running from them? Saved you from what I went through. Maya's voice got harder, more official. "Do you have any idea what Quinn's research subjects endure before you? What he did to women like Caroline, like Rebecca, like Jennifer? I know he killed them. He didn't kill them, Simone. He destroyed them so completely that death was a mercy. Psychological torture disguised as experimental therapy. And the government was paying him millions to perfect the techniques." Maya opened a file folder, spread photographs across the table between us. Images of women in various states of psychological breakdown. Catatonic, self-harming, completely detached from reality. This is what Quinn Bancroft does to people. This is what he would have done to you if we hadn't intervened. I looked at the photographs, felt sick, but forced myself to keep meeting Maya's eyes. "So you decided to hand me over to him personally?" "I decided to give you a chance to survive it. By lying to me for 6 months? By studying my psychological profile and serving me up like the perfect test subject?" Maya leaned back in her chair, looking tired for the first time since she'd walked in. By making sure you were strong enough to fight back when the time came. That's not your choice to make. It was the only choice that kept you alive. Maya pulled out another set of photographs. These ones showed Quinn and me together, walking through the estate gardens, sitting at breakfast, working side by side in his study during the final days before our escape. "He fell in love with you," she said, watching my reaction. "That wasn't supposed to happen." "Love." I stared at the pictures, seeing moments I remembered differently now that I knew they were being watched. "He was studying me. He was protecting you. Look at the body language, Simone. Look at the way he watches you when you're not looking at him. That's not a researcher observing a subject. That's a man who's compromised his entire mission because he cares more about your safety than his research." The photographs showed what Maya was talking about. Quinn's expression when I wasn't paying attention was soft, concerned, completely different from the clinical detachment he'd shown during our fake experiments. "It doesn't matter," I said, but my voice wasn't as sure as I wanted it to be. "It matters because it's the only reason you're still alive." Maya leaned forward, intense. "Quinn's been feeding us false data for 8 months, sabotaging his own research to protect you. The psychological profiles, the experiment results, the documentation we needed to build our case. All of it was fabricated to make you look like a failed subject." My head was spinning. "Your case? Against the government program that's been funding human experimentation for the past decade. Against the people who turned trauma research into a weapon. Against everyone who thought it was acceptable to break people down and see what remained." Maya smiled, and for a moment she looked like the friend I'd known in college. "Quinn wasn't the target, Simone. He was the bait. We needed someone on the inside, someone with access to the real data, someone the program directors trusted completely. You used him too. We gave him a chance to fix what he'd done wrong, to save someone instead of destroying them." The door opened, and a man in a government suit walked in, whispered something in Maya's ear. She nodded, gathered up the photographs. "They're ready for you," she said, standing up. "Ready for what?" "Your testimony. We're filing federal charges against 17 government officials, 12 research directors, and 3 private contractors. The entire human experimentation network. Your evidence is the key to shutting it down permanently." Maya paused at the door, looked back at me. "Quinn's in the room next door, giving his testimony right now. He's confessing to everything. The real experiments, the deaths, his part in the whole program. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And me, you'll be free to go home. New identity if you want it, counseling support, financial compensation for what you endured." She waited, like she expected me to thank her or forgive her or acknowledge that she'd done the right thing. "Maya, yeah. Next time you want to save someone, try asking them first if they want to be saved." She looked like I'd slapped her. "I know you hate me right now, but someday you'll understand that everything I did was to protect you." "No," I said quietly. "Everything you did was to protect yourself from having to live with the guilt of running away. You used me to clean up your conscience, and you used Quinn to do your dirty work." Maya left without arguing, which told me I was right. I sat alone in the gray room, thinking about Quinn in an identical room next door, confessing to crimes that would destroy the rest of his life to protect mine. Thinking about choices and consequences and the difference between love and obsession, between protection and control, between justice and revenge. Have you ever discovered that the story you thought you were living was actually someone else's plan all along? Have you ever had to choose between letting someone you care about sacrifice themselves for you, or fighting to save them even when they might not deserve it? Because in about 10 minutes, they were going to bring me into a room full of federal prosecutors and ask me to tell them everything Quinn Bancroft had done to me. And I was going to have to decide whether to destroy him or save him. The funny thing was, for the first time in 2 weeks, the choice was completely mine. The federal courthouse in downtown Las Vegas was nothing like the movies. No dramatic music, no packed gallery of observers, just fluorescent lights and government officials who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I sat at a long table facing a panel of prosecutors, defense attorneys, and federal investigators. Quinn was at another table 20 feet away, close enough to see but too far to touch. He looked exhausted, older than his 34 years, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made his green eyes look pale. He hadn't looked at me once since they brought me in. "Mrs. Bancroft," the lead prosecutor began, "please state your relationship to the defendant." "He's my husband." The words felt strange after everything that had happened. "Legally, anyway." "And how did this marriage come about?" I took a breath, looked at Quinn, and made my choice. I volunteered to impersonate my friend Maya Chun at her wedding to Dr. Bancroft. Maya had gotten scared and asked me to take her place. "Why would you agree to such a request?" "Because Maya told me she was afraid of disappointing people. She said it would just be one day, handle the ceremony and the immediate aftermath. Then she'd come back and deal with the situation herself." The prosecutor made notes. "What happened after the ceremony?" "Dr. Bancroft took me to his estate in Nevada. That's when I realized the situation was more complicated than Maya had led me to believe." "In what way?" I looked at Quinn again. This time he was watching me. His expression was careful, neutral, but I could see the question in his eyes. "What are you going to tell them?" "Dr. Bancroft had been conducting psychological research on his romantic partners without their informed consent. When I arrived at his estate, he explained that he knew I wasn't Maya and that he'd been expecting me specifically." "Expecting you specifically?" "Yes." Maya had provided him with detailed psychological profiles of me over a period of several months. Dr. Bancroft had requested someone with specific personality traits for his research. The room got quieter. This was the part they'd been waiting for. "What kind of research?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. Dr. Bancroft was studying how people respond to controlled psychological pressure. He was trying to understand how trauma affects decision-making and emotional regulation. "And you were a test subject in this research?" "Initially, yes." Initially, here was the moment that would decide Quinn's future and mine. Dr. Bancroft's research methods changed significantly during my time at his estate. What started as clinical observation evolved into what I can only describe as protective behavior. The prosecutor frowned. "Protective behavior?" Dr. Bancroft became aware that his former employers were planning to take custody of me and subject me to much more invasive and dangerous experiments. His behavior shifted from studying me to hiding me from them. "Can you elaborate on these dangerous experiments?" I pulled out the documents Jennifer Torres had helped me compile during our underground weeks. Dr. Bancroft showed me evidence of what happened to previous research subjects. Women who were subjected to extreme psychological manipulation until they suffered complete mental breakdowns. Several died as a result of the treatment, and Dr. Bancroft was responsible for these deaths. This was it. The question that would send Quinn to prison for life or give him a chance at something resembling freedom. Dr. Bancroft was involved in the research that led to these deaths, yes. But by the time I arrived at his estate, he was actively working to expose and stop the program that had caused them. The defense attorney sat up straighter. This wasn't the testimony they'd been expecting. "Mrs. Bancroft, are you saying that Dr. Bancroft was working undercover to expose this research program?" "I'm saying that Dr. Bancroft realized his research was being used to harm people instead of help them, and he decided to do something about it. Marrying me wasn't part of an experiment. It was legal protection to keep me away from people who wanted to hurt me." Quinn was staring at me now, and I could see something like hope starting to replace the resignation in his expression. "Did Dr. Bancroft ever harm you during your time at his estate?" "No, he never harmed me physically or psychologically. He provided me with information about the danger I was in, resources to protect myself, and ultimately helped me escape when federal agents came to take custody of me." "But you were held against your will?" "I was kept in a secure location for my own protection, yes. But when I asked to leave, Dr. Bancroft provided me with the means to do so safely." The prosecutor looked frustrated. This wasn't going according to their script. "Mrs. Bancroft, are you aware that your testimony contradicts statements Dr. Bancroft has already given to investigators?" "I'm aware that Dr. Bancroft has been trying to take full responsibility for crimes committed by people much more powerful than him. But I was there. I saw what actually happened. And what happened was a man trying to fix a terrible mistake." I stood up, looked directly at Quinn for the first time all day. My husband saved my life. He risked everything to protect me from people who would have destroyed me completely. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty too because I chose to stay with him. I chose to trust him. I chose to love him. The room was completely silent. The real criminals are the government officials who funded human experimentation programs for years. The real criminals are the people who turned trauma research into a weapon. Dr. Bancroft was their victim just as much as I was, and when he found the strength to fight back, he saved both of us. I sat back down, hands shaking but voice steady. That's my testimony. The prosecutor looked at his notes, at Quinn, at me. Mrs. Bancroft, do you wish to remain married to Dr. Bancroft? I smiled for the first time in weeks. Edo. Quinn's face broke into the most genuine expression I'd ever seen from him. Surprise, gratitude, love, and something that looked like hope for the future. 6 months later, we were living in a small town in Montana under our real names. Quinn taught computer science at the local college. I started a non-profit organization helping survivors of psychological trauma. We bought a house with a garden where nothing was under surveillance and all the doors open from the inside. Sometimes people ask how you can fall in love with someone who hurt you. How you can build a marriage on a foundation that started with lies and manipulation and fear. The answer is, you can't. But you can fall in love with who someone becomes when they choose to be better. You can build a marriage on the foundation of who you both decide to be when you're free to choose each other honestly. Quinn and I chose each other. Not because we had to, not because we were trapped together, not because anyone else decided we were perfect for each other. We chose each other because we'd seen the worst parts of ourselves in each other and decided that love was stronger than the damage we'd survived. 3 years after the trial, Quinn still wakes up sometimes from nightmares about Caroline, about Rebecca, about all the women whose names he used to whisper to that wall safe. I still have moments when I catch him watching me too carefully and wonder if he's studying my reactions or just memorizing my face because he loves it. But we talk about these things now. We go to therapy together. We've built a life based on honesty instead of protection, choice instead of control, trust instead of fear. Maya sends Christmas cards sometimes. She's working for a victim's rights, or I don't forgive her, but I understand her. Sometimes love makes you do terrible things to protect the people you care about. Sometimes the worst betrayals come from the best intentions. The government officials who funded the human experimentation program received sentences ranging from 5 to 20 years. The research programs were shut down, their victims compensated, their methods exposed to public scrutiny. Quinn's testimony was crucial to the prosecution, and his cooperation reduced his sentence to 5 years probation and mandatory psychological counseling. He kept his end of the bargain. He got help. He got better. He learned to see people as humans instead of data points, to feel empathy instead of clinical curiosity, to love without needing to control. I kept my end too. I learned to trust my own judgment, to set boundaries, to ask for what I needed instead of just adapting to what I was given. I learned that survival isn't just about getting through something. It's about becoming stronger because of what you've been through. Our wedding was nothing like the fake ceremony at Lake Tahoe. Just us, a judge, and 2 witnesses from the victim support group where we'd met other survivors of government research programs. I wore a blue dress I'd picked out myself. Quinn wore a suit he bought with money from his new teaching job. We wrote our own vows. I promise to choose you every day, I said. Not because I have to, but because I want to. I promise to earn your trust every day, he said. Not because I deserve it, but because you're worth becoming someone who does. Simple words. Honest words. The kind of promises you can build a real life on. Now, when Quinn whispers in the dark, it's my name, he says. When I wake up scared, he holds me until I remember I'm safe. When we make love, it's because we want each other, not because either of us is trying to prove something or gain something or study something. It's just love. Complicated, hard-won, completely voluntary love. The estate in Nevada was sold to pay restitution to the families of Quinn's previous research subjects. The underground complex where we hid was shut down by federal authorities, its residents relocated to legal witness protection programs. Jennifer Torres won a Pulitzer Prize for her investigative series on government human experimentation. Marcus, the groundskeeper who'd helped us escape, disappeared completely. I like to think he found somewhere safe to grow roses without surveillance cameras watching. Sometimes people ask if I regret saying "I do" in that glass chapel, wearing Maya's dress, becoming someone else for 36 hours that changed my entire life. The answer is no. I don't regret it, because that choice, to help a friend, to step into someone else's shoes, to take a risk that seemed small and turned out to be enormous, led me to discover who I really was underneath all the fear and people-pleasing and small dreams I'd settled for. It led me to Quinn, who saw that strength before I did and helped me find it even when his methods were wrong. It led me to a life bigger and more dangerous and more meaningful than anything I'd planned for myself. Most importantly, it led me to understand the difference between being chosen by someone else and choosing yourself, between being protected and being free, between surviving something and becoming stronger because of it. Quinn and I didn't fall in love in that estate in Nevada. We fell in love afterward, when we were both free to leave, free to choose, free to build something real from the wreckage of what we'd been through. Our love story didn't begin with "I do" in a fake ceremony. It began with "I choose you" in a federal courthouse, when I had the power to destroy him and decided to save him instead. It began with "I choose us" when he had the chance to disappear into witness protection and decided to stay and fight for our future together. Real love isn't about perfect people finding each other. It's about broken people choosing to heal together, to grow together, to become better together than they ever could have been apart. Have you ever had to choose between the safe path and the right path? Have you ever discovered that the worst thing that happened to you led to the best thing in your life? Love isn't always pretty. It's not always safe. It's not always the story you plan to live. But when it's real, when it's chosen freely by two people who've seen each other's worst moments and decided to stay anyway, it's worth everything you risk to find it. Quinn and I found each other in the worst possible way, under the worst possible circumstances, surrounded by lies and manipulation and danger. But we chose to stay together in the best possible way. With honesty, with healing, with the daily decision to love each other not despite what we'd been through, but because of who we'd become by surviving it. That's our story. Messy, complicated, unconventional, and completely true. The substitute bride who became a real wife. The researcher who learned to love instead of study. The friends who betrayed each other, and the enemies who saved each other, and the government program that tried to break people and accidentally brought two broken people together so they could heal. Sometimes the best endings come from the worst beginnings. Sometimes love really can grow from anything, even from a lie, a kidnapping, and a fake wedding in a glass chapel overlooking Lake Tahoe. If you made it this far in our story, thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that people can change, that love can grow in the strangest places, that sometimes the most dangerous choices lead to the most beautiful destinations. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about survival, love, and second chances. Leave a comment telling us about your own moments when everything changed, when you chose courage over safety, truth over comfort, love over fear. And remember, you're stronger than whatever you're facing. You're worth fighting for. You deserve to be chosen by someone who sees your strength and loves you not in spite of your struggles, but because of how beautifully you survived them. This has been The Substitute Bride, a story about choosing love over fear, truth over lies, and each other over everyone and everything else. Until next time, keep choosing love. Keep choosing courage. Keep choosing each other, because that's how all the best love stories really begin.